I'd also like to say a special welcome to Paddy Mahon, our CEO for County Council, and our first citizen, Cathaoirleach, Mark Casey, here today. And very welcome to everybody. And on behalf of the Mariah Edgeworth Centre and our hard-working festival committee, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Doyle here to Edgeworth today. Dr. Doyle, as I said, is the first Provost and female President of Trinity College, Dublin. And as I've mentioned before on many occasions here, Edgeworth was once considered the centres of enlightenment here in Ireland during the late 18th and early 19th century. And this was mainly due to the influences of the Edgeworth family. And I'm sure Mariah, though not being permitted to attend Trinity, as many of her family and male contemporaries had done previously, I'm sure she would have actually foreseen the day that a woman would become the Provost of Trinity, because that's the type of person she was. She displayed her determination for women to share equal rights, and she gained associate membership of the Royal Irish Academy at the age of 69. And that came about, I'll just tell you how that came about. William Rowan Hamilton became president of the Royal Irish Academy, and the Academy hadn't paid much attention to literature, and he wanted to correct that. And who did he turn to? Only his friend Mariah Edgeworth, to ask how he should go about that and to successfully implement it. And the first thing she wrote back to him in her letter was, the first thing you should do is invite women to become members of the Royal Irish Academy. Now that didn't happen until in the mid-1900s, but she was made an associate member. Many famous historic figures have visited Edgeworthstown in the past, and it is a great honour for the Mariah Edgeworth Centre and the Festival Committee that Dr. Doyle accepted our invitation. Edgeworthstown, again, we're aiming to become a destination for visitors from all parts of the globe who are anxious to learn about this remarkable woman, Mariah Edgeworth. In her few short years, the Mariah Edgeworth Centre has been recognised as an international hub for its research into new insights into the Edgeworth family and for generously sharing its learnings. The visit here today will, I hope, add to the awareness of the important role played from Edgeworthstown in the 19th century and the role it continues to play today in leadership and community development. I now invite the Cathaoirleach of Dublin County Council, Mark Casey, to welcome our distinguished guest.
Thanks, Matt. And fellow councillors, CEO Paddy Mahon of Longford County Council, Dr. Doyle, ladies and gentlemen, and the committee members. As Cathaoirleach of Longford County Council, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this open event at the Mariah Edgeworth Festival. This festival is now in its 29th year and aims to keep the legacy of the Edgeworth family alive and relevant today. From education to literature, the arts and politics and creativity, the Edgeworth family made a major contribution to education and opportunity were very important to the family. Their publication of Practical Education in 1798 set the agenda that led to the setting up of the national schools in 1831. This was very important to Ireland. It led to first primary school system which provided a state-funded, centrally controlled education for all children, regardless of their religious affiliation. Importantly, it addressed the existing inadequacies to accessing schools. Edgeworthstown has many links to Trinity College in Dublin. Indeed, our own Oliver Goldsmith, who received his classical education in a school on this site, graces the entrance to Trinity College with an impressive statue. It was with great pleasure that I give a warm Longford welcome to the President of Trinity College, Dr. Linda Doyle, here to Edgeworthstown today. I would like to wish the Festival Committee all the best for their weekend. Thank you very much.
is it, should I don't think this is on anyway, is it?
No.
Maybe,
No.
yeah, I don't need
Yeah,
to
I don't
use
think
it.
you need it.
Yeah. I'll stand here if that's okay. So first of all, can I say thank you very, very much. We've already had a wonderful warm welcome. I'm here with Sienna, a colleague from work, and we've just learned so much actually, even in the short time we're here so far, because Matt is just amazing in what he knows. And I think that brings me to an important point. I'm not a historian, I'm not an expert in Maria Edgeworth, but I'm hopefully I will have something to say that is of interest to you. But feel free to interrupt if you think that I'm saying anything that's incorrect. So what I thought I would do is I would look at what was happening then and why it's actually completely relevant now in terms of education and in terms of values for the world, and kind of look at that through a Trinity prism. And I feel really, really privileged to be here in a place that has so many amazing Trinity connections. And I was just saying to Sienna, this has to be the first of many visits, because there are so many things I think to explore. So I don't know whether you know, but Trinity, I'll stand here so people can see. Trinity was founded in 1592. So it's the oldest university in Ireland. It's 433 years old now. This is an image that was sent to Queen Elizabeth I back in the 1600s, and it was kind of a monastery-like entity. So from way back then, and most of that doesn't stand anymore. And obviously then, in the hundreds of years that have gone by, it's spread out around the city. So I always say to people, don't panic, we do not have a tube station in Dublin. But I drew this map to emphasise the fact that Trinity, when you close your eyes and people think of Trinity, they normally think of the cobblestones in Front Square, but we're spread out all over the city. We're in, St James's Hospital, Tala Hospital, and many, many different locations, because it's a comprehensive university, a university that does a wide range of subjects from, the health, STEM to art, humanities and social science. So one of the interesting things about old universities, I suppose in one way, is their ability to endure. And if you go back and look, so we were founded in 1592, and you might not be able to see this so clearly from the back, but I just wrote in various things that have happened over the lifetime of the university. Back, the flight of the Earls, the Irish Rebellion, the famines, First and Second World War in Easter Rising, and right up to today in the world where we've COVID, the Ukraine war, what's happening between Israel and Gaza, India, Pakistan now, etc. And we're older than the state, and one of the things I think you can say about it is that we're able to endure through all of these things. And actually sometimes when in my role you're a bit worried about what's going to happen, you kind of get some comfort in the fact that you've endured through good and bad times in the past. So as we've kind of lived through those times, we've responded to those times in very different ways. And I just put a tiny few things in. So as far as I could see, when I look back at what Trinity did in the famine, I would say not too much. And I found that this actually is a book that's a history of one of our debating societies. We have the oldest debating society in the world in Trinity, and that's the oldest student society in the world as well, called the HIST. And I found something in the book of the HIST about how they actually raised money for the famine in it. But to a certain extent, we were inward looking. And then this is actually a picture I only found recently, and it relates to the 1916 Rising. And actually these are British troops in Trinity. And I see somebody, you can argue what side of history we were on in that. But very, very interesting. So there were things that were outside our walls that we didn't engage with. There were things that came inside the walls. And then right up to modern times, this is a picture, and I don't know whether anyone can guess what this picture is. Pardon?
32.
No, this is a picture in of the Dublin riots. When there were riots in Dublin about a year and a bit ago, and actually it was this is on O'Connell Street. I just like this picture, like is probably the wrong word, but it was a really interesting time for us in Trinity because we had to lock the doors and not leave anybody go home, and we had about 400 students who were there and couldn't go home that night because it was too dangerous in the city, and we had to make sure that we actually were open to people who were in trouble and had to come in. So the reason I have these pictures here is because when I think back over, and again as I said, I'm not a historian, when I think back over the history of Trinity, there's things that kind of we were able to shut ourselves off from, and there are things that have come in. And the way the world is now, and this is the front arch of Trinity if anyone hasn't seen it, the way the world is now, you can't shut anything out. And when I look at the big issues in the world today, they're part and parcel of how we live and how we navigate the world. And they're issues like climate change. So, you know, all of our students, all of our staff are hugely motivated by that. It really drives a huge number of choices that we have. And they really kind of penetrate what we do. There are issues like war around the world. This is an image from Gaza. You know, on a day-to-day basis, as you run a large institution like Trinity with 4,000 staff and 23,000 students, these issues matter. We have students from all around the world, some who come from war-torn areas, and we have all sorts of issues that arise when you're dealing with education as you navigate this. And then, of course, there's existential threats to education. If you look at what's happening to higher education in the US, some of the choices that are being made there, they may seem to everyone in this room that they only matter over there, but in fact that's not the case. They have deep impacts on us. And we hear a lot of the time that Ireland is an open economy, and Trinity is an open and outward-looking university. And we do research with people all around the world, and we have huge amounts of engagements with the US, and the choices that are being made there and the decisions that are being made in restricting academic freedom, in determining what you can and can't do research on, they actually filter back to us quite strongly and all around the world. So I suppose my major point really is that we're living in very, very challenging times. You know, I look sometimes, and I'm glad I'm kind of the age I am, that I didn't have to be in my teenage years and 20s on social media and worry what I looked like or didn't look like in a picture, or my every move being followed. I think it's challenging, and we see it in our students in terms of the challenges they face about the planet around them and how they care about the planet and how they worry about that. And it's also challenging that the world is in such chaos. And I mean, you know, when you open the newspapers at the moment, you saw the India-Pakistan thing this week, it is really, I suppose, understandable that you hear people saying that they don't even want to listen to news, that they want to kind of back away from it. So I love my job. It's the most fantastic, wonderful job in the world, I have to say, and I feel really privileged to be in the role. But you do ask yourselves, what can we do? And what are our obligations, and how should we work and help the next education of people that we're generating in these times? So I suppose I have a very simple message in terms of thinking about what we're doing and why we're here today. And the first thing to say is, okay, let's look back. Let's look back at the things that happened over that period of time in Edgeworth and how those things can help me and other people make sense of the world that we live in today. So I took this, which I'd drawn earlier, and then I just put some of the really wonderful things. Now, Matthew will be looking at me, and I'm sure I missed a whole load of really important things. So Trinity, as I said, was 1592. I believe the land was given to the Edgeworths around 1916, and then you have various different, there's so many amazing things, I just put in a few, like Maria Edgeworth being born, her father, the manor house, the experimental school, the publication of practical education, and then even things like the Education Act, which I understand from all of the stuff you've written, that was hugely influenced by the work that happened here. And when you look at that, and you look at the actual wonderful things that have happened, and I'm kind of assuming that everyone in this room might be an expert on every one of those things here, you look at those things, and you say to yourself, first of all, wow, it's incredible what happened here. It's incredible the intellectual kind of thoughts about education. It's incredible the experimental and wonderful things that happened. And it kind of leads me to two main observations. And that's what I'm kind of calling the Edgeworth way. And those two observations is that they were ahead of their time with their ideas in education and had some wonderful values. And much of what Mariah stood for can help us with the world we face today. And that's kind of the argument, I suppose, that for me, that I've come here to make. Because I have to admit, I mean, I studied when I was doing my leaving cert many decades ago. Castle Rackround was on the course, and but I didn't know a lot of the stuff that I now know some of, and because of your advice I looked it up, and because of some of the things that you sent me, and it really is extraordinary and really is amazing. So I thought what I might do is I might show you some of the things that we do in Trinity, and Trinity is just one example that kind of arise from the ideas that came from here, and also some of the ways that I really admire Mariah Edgeworth that helped me navigate this very difficult world that I think we live in. So, you know, it goes without saying, and I know Mark mentioned this as well, and Matt in the opening words, you know, Mariah Edgeworth really believed in the education of women. And I'll just call this out for people who can't see, so this is just a quote. What a misfortune it is to be born a woman. Why seek for knowledge which can prove only that our wretchedness is irredeemable? If a ray of light break in upon us, it is but to make darkness more visible, to show us the new limits, the Gothic structure, the impenetrable barriers of our prison. And I think that is just, they're just really wonderful, emotional sentences that explain the destitute of what it feels like to not be able to pursue education. And I think it's so poetically and brilliantly expressed, and it captures, in essence, of, you know, when I stand here and you look back and you think, you know, there was a world, and there was a world in which we live, where huge numbers of people around the world are still experiencing this. So I think this is amazing that she was thinking like this and that she wrote like this. So just to give you a little bit of the history of women in Trinity. So you might wonder why I have a picture of a salmon here. Does anyone know why I might have a picture of a salmon there?
Knowledge.
Pardon?
Knowledge.
No, not salmon. So George Salmon was the Provost back in 1904. Close enough. I thought this was a nicer picture. And George Salmon at the time said over his dead body, would there be any women in Trinity? And there's kind of a story, and it's slightly exaggerated like we all do, that he died on Friday and the first woman came in the following Monday. So it was only in 1904. So remember, we were founded in 1592. And it was only in 1904 that the first women began studying in Trinity. And it is amazing to think it took that length of time. But it is more amazing that Mariah Edgeworth was all over this and out in front and had all the fantastic poems and the advocacy that she did and the work that the Edgeworths did about education in the first place. And strangely, actually, on the one hand, Trinity was kind of slow, and on the other hand, we were fast. So I don't know whether anyone here has ever heard of the steamboat ladies. So back in 1904, even though you could study as a woman in Oxford and Cambridge, you actually couldn't get a degree, so you didn't get your piece of paper, as they say, you didn't get conferred at the end. So a group of women came from Oxford and Cambridge over to Trinity to kind of finalise their, their studies and actually physically get their degree. And they were called the Steamboat Ladies. And we actually, the first accommodation we had for women off campus was because of these Steamboat Ladies. And it only went on for a few years then, because in 1907 Oxford and Cambridge finally decided they would give women degrees as well. But that is so recent to think that the world was like that. But that world went on for a very long time. And this is just one of many facts. You couldn't actually stay on the main campus in Trinity overnight as a woman until 1972. Like, you couldn't be a fellow until the 60s, you couldn't be in a debating society until the late 60s. There were a whole load of things that kept going like that, you know. And it's really interesting to see that. And there's a lovely book actually that Susan Parks and others did called A Danger to the Men, and basically that was the root of why you couldn't obviously, sure, they'd go wild if there was women staying on campus. But it really does show again how Mariah Edgeworth was out there ahead of everyone. And you've mentioned this, Matt. So I'm in the I've never been first in anything in my life except being the first Provost and President of Trinity. I waited for a good one, I think. But I'm the 45th Provost of Trinity. This is the first, Adam Loftus. And really interestingly, so a colleague of mine, we had an event, I wasn't at it, but she was at an event in the House of Lords in the UK, and somebody from the House of Lords said to her, "You're from that place that's run by the female mafia." And because we have a lot of female leadership now in the university. And I thought it was really, really interesting. I thought, first of all, it was interesting that they'd observed it. But secondly, I thought it was very interesting because I doubt you'd be anywhere where someone would say you're from that place run by the male mafia. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But the more interesting point, and this goes back to Maria Edgeworth really, is that no matter how much progress you make, you can never take that progress for granted. And we're actually seeing that played out in the world more and more every day. And we find ourselves that there are little and big things that we still need to do, and that, you know, can very, very easily be invisible to you, but you still need to push. So I'm just going to give a few examples of those. And one of this is this. So this is our old library. So our old library, we're what's known as a copyright library, so we get a copy of every book published in Ireland and Britain, but our library goes back hundreds of years as well. I think the library here, by the way, and the collection is utterly amazing, and just like us, you've got many treasures you've yet to discover, as do we, but this is our old library. And for anyone who's ever been there, and you're absolutely welcome, if you're in Dublin, if you go into this, it's a huge long room, and down each side of it there's these busts of, and they've been there for centuries, and they are all men, and we only 2 years ago put the first women in there. And this is the evening, it was St. Bridget's Day, we did it 2 years ago. This is the event. We had these artists create these. This is Mary Wollstonecraft, and this is Rosalind Franklin, and we unveiled them. And I remember going to that event, and I thought, this will just it'll be lovely and it'll be symbolic. But actually it was really, really much more powerful emotionally. And the reason for that is it just really makes you realise the way the structures in the world around you are built. And if you don't keep intervening, things will never change. So that was an interesting moment for us. And then this is my favourite building in this is a library, a very brutalist library built by Paul Carlack, designed by Paul Carlack, and this used to be called the Berkeley Library. And we had a lot of soul searching in Trinity. So Berkeley was an incredible philosopher, really brilliant, but a slave owner. And we had a lot of soul searching and how to deal with that. And one of the things is, you know, there's a lot of challenge, and you'll find it yourselves, you know, are you erasing history by changing something? What should you do about challenges like that? But our students found this very, very challenging. So we put a group together to look at the legacy issues. So if you're 400 years plus old, there will be legacy issues. There'll be things in the past you're really proud of, and there'll be things in the past you're not so proud of. So one of the aims we had was, how do you discuss these difficult things? And how to discuss them in a civilised way, and we managed to do that, and we decided to dename the library, and then after a while rename it again. So it's now called the Evan Boland Library. So another wonderful Irish woman who creative writer, our poet, fantastic poet, and it's actually the first building on our main campus named after a woman. You're way ahead of us here again with even roundabouts named after a woman. But this is some of her poetry that was kind of, the night we did the launch, it was kind of superimposed onto the front of the building just in celebration. And there'll be people in the room who look around and say, that was a bad decision, and there'll be people in the room who'll agree with that decision. But for me, it's all about the respect and dignity in which you can come to a decision and make it. And that's kind of what I was very proud in Trinity. We got to there in that way, and we made this decision. And now I think people are very happy with the new name of the library. This then is a really interesting event, and it just goes in. I put it in because I thought, so there is a very famous painting called The School of Athens. And if you look at it, there's a whole lot of philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates and all of these figures in it, and it was painted. I actually think it's somewhere in the Vatican, in the Sistine Chapel, actually. Very, very tiny for the moment. And we have an old building called the Museum Building, and this is recreated with just women figures. in one of our buildings. And again, it's part of these things. How do you make people think about what, that's me, if you can, and that's Mary Robinson there in it. And it was a wonderful, kind of really uplifting event. But it speaks to my point that, that you know, creativity, so it speaks, Mariah Edgeworth was creative, had incredible imagination, incredible vision. And the way she was thinking and the constant need to intervene to make sure things don't slip back and to be creative about how you do that remains today, is I suppose the point I'm drilling home, I hope. The next thing I just want to go on to, and this is another one of the quotes that I loved, and I don't know, Matt, whether you know. So she said, "Genius without education is like silver in the mine." And when I saw that quote, I immediately, and in fact, actually, I think I was reading it. It is attributed to her, but anyway, I really thought to myself, oh my God, that is a thing that we face all the time. So when I look at this, what this means to me is all around Ireland and all around the world, there are people who are fantastically capable to engage with university life, but do not have the opportunity to. And you know, sometimes you kind of sit there and you might be patting yourself on the back that you've had to, oh look, I've achieved this. Well, there's plenty of you who could achieve what you achieve and more, given the chance. And for me, this is really, really important. So when I think of this in the Trinity context, I think of it, so we have a thing called the Trinity Access Project. So as part of that project, we try to make sure we engage with people from areas and from schools and backgrounds that might not think college was open to them. And especially a university like Trinity, you can sometimes feel, oh, that's not for me, I wouldn't be welcome there. And it is really, really important that we go out and do that. So I just thought this would be interesting. So we had at one stage in Front Square, so this structure is in Front Square, the company, and we had a gigantic artwork of Samuel Beckett, and this wonderful student called Leah Kenny, who did her research on Samuel Beckett. And she came into Trinity through an Access project, and you know, to me it was just this incredible, the power of learning. And once you give somebody, and Samuel Beckett is complex and challenging, and once you give somebody the opportunity, they can do so much. And I thought I might just put it in context. You know, we have about, actually that should say nearly 23,000 students now. Trinity is huge, it's grown hugely in the last decade. But about 30% of our students come in through what we call non-traditional routes. And a lot of the time when, you know, Trinity is an elite university, but to me there's a huge difference between elite and being elitist. And a part of what we want to do is to make sure that doors are open to everyone. Because there is a great silver in the mine, there are great people who are, and you know, to me it's a human right actually that you have access to education, and that you should, we shouldn't in one sense be patting ourselves on the back at all for this. This is what you want. You want people who you know, and this is, I think, this is what I interpret from Mariah Edgeworth. We're also what's known as a University of Sanctuary. So I mentioned earlier that around the world, and I think Mariah Carey would definitely support this if she was here now. Or Mariah's earlier, we were talking about the Maria versus Mariah, and Matt said I'm Mariah Carey. I blame you completely, Matt. Mariah Edgeworth, thank you. And I swore I wouldn't do that. Mariah Carey might agree as well. Who knows? That we'd be a University of Sanctuary, and we had our first 10 students and 2 staff from Gaza arrived this week. It took months and months and months and months and months to get safe passage out, and the Department of Foreign Affairs were very helpful, as was our own kind of global team. But as part of a University of Sanctuary, you're open to what we call scholars at risk, people who come from parts of the world who might not have any paperwork anymore to prove they did whatever or studied whatever, and you want to work with that. And then I just put this in here. So this, it's also important that our own staff, that we're inclusive about our own staff. And you know, in an academic institution, you know, it's a lot of the time the academics, you know, get the headlight, but we would not be able to function as a good university without the work of the professional staff in the university. And in our own university, if you've been 10 years in the university, you get an honorary master's, and to me that's also really important in terms of celebrating the talents of the university. So Mariah Edgeworth, I mean, understanding that notion that there is, as I said, that's my interpretation of what she said. There could be many others. It really speaks to me, that idea. There are fantastic people out there. That brilliance will stay unaccessed unless those opportunities are given, and it is up to all of us to make sure that we work hard for those opportunities, and we are the better for it, because it means more wonderful, capable, talented people get to be around us and help us do better things. So then I also thought it was interesting, and I don't, and maybe you will have some thoughts on this later, Matt. I don't know whether, we didn't talk about environmental or sustainable things back then necessarily, and I'm interpreting this kind of very, very literally. We don't understand the worth of water till the well is dry, and that to me, you could apply that to anything. But certainly I've chosen to apply it in terms of education in the context of the need to appreciate the planet around us. And as a result of that, and I would just say, this is part of the wilding areas we have in Trinity. And in fact, actually, to be even more literal, I was at the launch of our new Trinity Water Centre last week, and water is such the lifeblood of everything in the world, such a precious resource, and we continue to squander it. Not alone, actually, and it also continues to hamper our growth as a country in many ways. For example, in terms of we can't build new houses if there's not enough water to service them. So the whole idea of just appreciating where you are, and that being part of education, is really, really important as well. And I just put this in just as a matter of interest. This is called the Rubrics. This is now the oldest building in Trinity. So even though we were founded in 1592, the oldest standing building is from 1703, and people are always quite surprised at this building because it's red brick. Rubrics, that's where that came from, and all of the other buildings are kind of grey and kind of look older. But this building now has a Burr rating of B. It's served by geothermal energy from a geothermal source behind it, and most of water and heating in it is all sourced through that. And it's a Burr rating of B without any replacement of windows, because we weren't able to do that. So again, to me, it's about appreciating something while you have it. Another thing that I would say they stand over. So then just kind of, I suppose, come around to the final few points I want to make. When you look at somebody who writes, or look at a group of people who write things down, you can have lots of great ideas, and sometimes I find I'm great at saying things, but it's the actions behind it that really, really matter. And when I look at Edgeworth's town, and I look at the actions that I see here, those actions for me are really, really important as I look at education today and look at the challenges of the world that I spoke about. And I thought I'd just mention a few of those because they really, really stood out to me. So the first one is you have people here who are brave enough to open an experimental school. And that is fairly astounding and really. And when I think of our own journey in Trinity, and this may be not, a historian may not actually agree with my summary, but initially the Protestants stopped the Catholics, then the Catholics stopped the Catholics coming from Trinity, and now we're a secular university. And when I look at the thought about non-denominational education and secular education, there's a lovely sign in your school about secular education. I know that wasn't the experimental one, but I think it is really, really important that thoughts about education and what ways should be. You may or may not agree with some of them, but that thought and that notion of the experiment as well here is really important. And the reason why I say that is because we're in a phase now where we have to hugely experiment about education. And when I look at the world, and one of the biggest challenges we face is how AI interacts with education. How people do what they're supposed to do themselves, how they're assessed, how we use it in a powerful way to do accelerated discovery and research, how we're careful about the challenges it faces and kind of echoing back your own beliefs are kind of creating even greater false worlds. And that notion, that kind of spirit of experimentation and wanting to do things new in a different way, that's a really, really brave and courageous thing. And to be honest, even though we are actually doing stuff like this, I often have to remind people to keep that spirit of, like, you know, experimentation. And I mean, that doesn't mean you embrace everything open-heartedly and just accept everything the way it is. But that to me is a spirit that I see here when I look at the Edgeworth stand. The other thing is that really, really struck me. So I originally was an engineer. But I worked with creative arts practitioners as well, so I was professor of engineering and the arts before I took over this role. But what I see is a writer open to STEM when I look at Mariah Edgeworth. And I know, I believe, and I'm not sure, Matt, you may be able to tell me, I know it might not be straightforward as to whether she had to do some stuff because her father told her or not. I don't know. I saw something about that. But I was totally fascinated by the telegraph system that she was involved in. Now, I'm a telecoms engineer, so maybe that was particularly interesting for me. And I was talking to Christopher, who I met earlier, who is really into Marconi, and I'm really, really interested in all of these things. But I was totally interested. So this is, I took that example of a line of 6 words described by the telegraph, and I believe Mariah did that, and I consider her a coder. And the thing for me, and it's a point I kind of make a lot of the time, which I'm sure I bore people to death with it, but nonetheless. So sometimes I get invited to things as to speak as a woman in STEM. And I have 2 reactions, because it's a little bit in the past for me, because this job is all consuming, so I'm not kind of working in that anymore. I kind of go, oh. And then my other thought is that there is no such thing as a woman or a man not in STEM. And by that I mean it is really important for every one of us, whether we like it or not to necessarily be an engineer or design a circuit or a coder, but to understand technology. And this is my boring people to death slide. I use this all the time to describe why that's important. So this thing is called the Camden Bench, and it was designed in Camden in London. And it's designed purposely to stop, according to it, 23 different activities, right? So you can't sleep in it. So if you were homeless, you couldn't sleep in it. You can't ram it. You can't graffiti it. You can't skateboard in it. And there's even, I saw somewhere saying you can't do drugs in it, which I don't quite get that. But ultimately, it's a physical thing that has built into it social laws. And you don't need to put a thing up here saying, no homeless people can sleep here, nobody can skateboard here, nobody can ram this, because you just can't do it. And the reason I put this here is because you can see that, and you can understand what I mean when I say social laws are built into this. But that's exactly what's happening in the invisible digital world around you. Social laws are being built into it. Power is, the power of technology is determining what you can and can't do. Somebody is making some decision somewhere, and just because we don't see it as physically as we see something like this means that we don't appreciate as much that those social laws are being built into it. And that's why I stand back and say Mariah Edgeworth was a woman writer open to being in STEM, but all of us need to be somewhat technologically fluent, because we need to have a voice and be able to say what social laws we want and what we don't want and what we want to happen to us or not. So I look at her with utter amazement, because that divide sometimes we have, where here are the creative arts people and here are the science and tech people, was a divide that she said obviously didn't even see. So that to me is really, really wonderful.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm very, I don't know what's getting.
Oh, sorry, and you're very good to ask that. So that's science, technology, engineering and maths. And somebody just asked me what STEM was, and that's an example. I have this, my partner says to me all the time, I speak in acronyms, and I go, what acronyms am I talking about? But that just happens to be the one that we use. So Trinity does arts, humanities and social science, and then it does a range of STEM subjects in science, technology, engineering and maths, and then it does health sciences subjects like dentistry, nursing, medicine, pharmacy. So we just use the word STEM to kind of summarize those ones. And in fact, there's an acronym called STEAM, where the arts is inserted in the middle, and it's only been used in recent decades, but Mariah Edgeworth was definitely a STEAM person, I think, in many ways. And then, and this is, I'm nearly coming to the end now, she was also a person who does not react in a polarized manner. And I thought this was really, 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 really powerful. And Matt, you were telling me a little bit more about this earlier, and I only knew a little bit about it. And I believe you have a lot of letters, the transcript of the letters in this, but I read that she was accused of making an anti-Semitic reference in one of her works. And you know, as a result of that, and I discovered this morning, she developed a long relationship with the person who actually made that statement to her. She wrote a book in response to it, a kind of amende honorable, to explore the themes of prejudice. And to me, I just look at this in total and utter wonder. Because if you look at the world today, you're either for me or against me, you're on that side or you're on that side. Those people hate these people, totally polarized. And even in a university, I love our university and we do lots of debate and we have lots of different views, but still not enough of that. And I look at this and I think, oh my God, not alone did she reflect on herself and what she did and want to do something different. She managed to have a civilized, in-depth, ongoing conversation. She managed to unpack it in many different ways, and I would love that our world was more like that. And that to me, when I was kind of looking at all of the things that I wanted to say today, it was in these pieces that I was kind of most hugely motivated and kind of saying, I want to be like that. I want to be able to have that kind of intellectual exchange, and I want it to kind of make the world a better place, and that to me was absolutely lovely. So, and she said, we're all apt to think that an opinion that differs from our own is a prejudice, and I think that is hugely the case today, and something I think that, if we're serious about Edgeworth's town and serious about making a statement that you here have left a footmark and a footprint on the world, and what you do matters here. It's, I think, in these kind of things are some of the most powerful things that really, really, really are needed, and that we could all be better for. And then finally to say, she was a person who knows you can't let things slip. And that's the kind of world we're in today, where little bits and bobs of things are being eroded. And I read this paragraph she was writing at a time where her core values were under attack. After a period of seeming optimism, she saw the gap emerging between the Enlightenment's promise of progress and the growing distrust and fear of women. A conservative reaction to the French Revolution capitalised on fears of social instability by suggesting that the intellectual emancipation of women was a dangerous step towards French principles and Jacobinism. And if you read that sentence, and I swapped in and out various words, that is a description of the world we're living in, and you could even put it for the word women, put in anyone who's different from me, or you could put anyone who comes from a different culture in there. And I think it is really amazing that there was a kind of that level of I think awareness, and then that level of sticking to those values. And I put in this, which might seem completely out of kilter as to what's this doing here, but at the moment when we hear people say things like, sure, when people talk about equality, or another acronym, DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion, that they use in different countries, when we hear about that not really being important, and sure, look, just change the words and just do the same thing, we're not acknowledging the depth at which that slipping of values is going to. So this is a famous chart where if I was having a heart attack now, people might not notice, because we've been brought up understanding typical heart attack symptoms that for many years were seen as the heart attack symptoms, but they came from just because we understood better what men were experienced when they had a heart attack versus the different kind of things that women experience when they have a heart attack. And I put this there. It's from a book called Invisible Women, and I say this when I. By the way, I should say, when I talk about invisible women, I mean invisible people who are, whatever background they're from. Poor people are invisible, etc. But the kind of study you have to do to understand the difference here, the kind of studies and research you have to do to understand the difference in medication and what's better for women and what's better for men, is studies that involve equality, inclusion and diversity. So these things where sometimes people just concentrate on the words penetrate really deeply. And I think Mariah Edgeworth would know that that slippage of values, that it penetrates deep and wouldn't stand for it. And my final thing is, she said, tyranny and justice always produce cunning and falsehood. And I think, again, you know, I'm absolutely astounded that in everything I've read and kind of preparing for today, that it gives me both a sense of wonder and admiration of what happened here in Edgeworthstown and all of the wonderful things that came here. It gives me a sense of hope that if this inspiration can help me be a better person in this world, and it gives me a sense of hope that there's more people like this out there who want to push for good values, for the transformative nature of education, for standing up what we believe in. And with that, I just said they were way ahead of their time, and what she stood for can help us with the word today, and thank you. So that's all.
In Edgeworthstown, I'm often asked what are proud moments here in Edgeworthstown, and I can actually say to see a library like this here in Edgeworthstown, a town like ours, that deserved it as because of the legacy of Mariah Edgeworth, but to have it here in Edgeworthstown and the staff that are in it, it's described now as a community library, and it really is a community library. It caters for everything. So I'd like to thank Martina and the county manager and the whole lot for this facility. Again, the festival has to be financed and everything else, and we have a number of sponsors. And just to conclude, the Creative Ireland and the Creative Longford programme has brought great benefits to the arts and to events like this here in County Longford. I'm just going to ask Ciarán Lennon, who's representing the Creative Longford, just to finalise the event. And thanks very much. If you were as much inspired as this talk as I have been, you've got a great morning out of it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Nat. So my name is Ciarán Lennon, as Matt said, and I'm the Creative Communities Engagement Officer with Longford County Council. So along with the title, but basically just a little bit on Creative Ireland and how it's supporting events like this throughout the county. Creative Ireland came about on foot of the 2016 commemorations. So it really started from 2017 on. And it's rolled out throughout the county councils, and the programme is run by the county council here through the library service, and it has a creative and cultural team. So basically it's to promote creativity and culture throughout the county of Longford, through all walks of life, and we work with artists, creatives, community groups, events, projects and festivals like this and others throughout the county, and it's done really through grant supports. So we're county-wide, and this year we're supporting 50 different projects, so it's really broad. And just to say, like last year and this year, 25% of the grant applications we got in were from new people, new groups, new projects, new artists, new creatives. We've been supporting the Mariah Edgeworth Festival since 2018. And I was just struck by what Dr. Linda said there about Mariah Edgeworth and her creativity, and it just shows how important it is in community life. Another project that's rolled out by the council here and we supported is Microsoft Dreamspace that takes place in St Mary's campus, just up the road here. So of course STEAM would be the main driving force there. Our programme really, it's from the current one is from 2023 on to 2028. So we're really looking forward to supporting more initiatives like this, more projects throughout the county, and really I just want to, on behalf of myself, the creative and cultural team, Martina Needham, who's the county librarian and Creative Ireland coordinator for the county, unfortunately can't be here, but we just want to wish the Mariah Edgeworth Festival and the committee the very best of luck, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks.